Welcome to the channel where powerful stories come to life. Get ready for truth, emotion, and transformation. One story at a time. You know those situations that seem like something out of a movie, but actually happen every single day right under our noses? It's the classic judging a book by its cover, except this time the ones being observed were the ones doing the judging. The owner of a large fast food chain decided to do what few leaders dare, disguise himself as a deliveryman, and personally check the service in his own restaurants. But what he heard at the counter was shocking. Employees laughing at and mocking an elderly customer, as if he had no value at all. Now brace yourself. What could have ended in firings and scandals turned into a true lesson in transformation. Instead of shouting and punishments, what followed was a deep change strategy. The kind of lesson that applies not only to businesses, but to life itself. And the most curious part? It's something you can apply today, anywhere people interact. Get ready, because this story takes a turn that few would have the wisdom to handle. On an ordinary morning, Roberto, the owner of the fast food chain, decided to trade his comfortable office for the humble delivery uniform. It was almost comical to see him there, wearing a crooked cap and carrying a thermal backpack, walking into one of his own stores. But it wasn't a joke. He was after something few leaders have the courage to face: the raw, unfiltered truth about customer service. And to do that, he had to blend in, just another face in the daily routine. As he stood by the counter holding a fake order, his attention was caught by whispers that, though low, carried a subtle venom. Two employees were chatting, laughing at an elderly man sitting in the corner. Guys like him just take up space and don't even order much, they mocked. In that moment, Roberto realized he was witnessing one of those stories that, if handled right, could teach more than any traditional corporate training. It's in these small, everyday scenes that great business stories are born. How many companies, for instance, have lost huge opportunities by underestimating a customer? Warren Buffett, with his simple way of dressing, could easily be mistreated at any random diner. The real lesson was beginning to unfold before Roberto's eyes, but he knew the best part was yet to come. Behind that simple uniform was a story of decades of hard work, vision, and above all, purpose. Roberto wasn't just the owner of the chain. He was the architect of a company founded on the commitment to provide dignified jobs and social inclusion. From the start, he made a point of hiring elderly people, individuals in need, and even vulnerable youth. Because in his view, real business isn't just about numbers, it's about people. How many business owners today can sit at a table and call each employee by name? Roberto knew most of them by heart. He knew some of their family problems, others' dreams. As Sam Walton, Walmart's founder, used to say, if you take care of your people, they will take care of your business. These real stories are what separate leaders from bosses, companies from cold money-making machines. So upon hearing that cruel comment about the elderly man, Roberto's blood didn't boil with anger, but with reflection. If this just happened now, how many times has it happened before, he thought. He knew that simple punishment wouldn't fix it. There was something deeper. A blind spot in the company culture needed to be exposed, and for that, he had to observe more closely what was rooted in that behavior. Roberto could have stopped everything right there, but he chose to step back. Like a true strategist, he understood that before correcting, he needed to see the whole picture. He decided to stay undercover for several days, visiting other branches, always dressed as a delivery man. And that's how new stories began to emerge before his eyes, all following the same pattern: subtle mockery, impatience with the elderly, disdain for customers who, in the limited view of some employees, weren't profitable. Here's where many people get it wrong. Cultural problems aren't solved with a single scolding, but with a deep dive into the root cause. Roberto could clearly see that the problem wasn't just a few employees. It was a silent virus starting to infect the soul of customer service. And often, companies don't even realize it until they lose customers and reputation. That's why he decided to gather evidence, discrete recordings, notes on behaviors, short audio clips capturing these sad stories of judgment and neglect. As he observed, Roberto remembered great examples of cultural transformation, like what happened at Starbucks years ago when the company shut down operations for an entire day to train all staff on respectful service and inclusion. He knew he was facing something similar, not just an operational issue, but a giant opportunity to change the company's DNA. And for that, a new stage was already forming in his mind. That same night, While most employees were already home, Roberto called a private meeting with his board of directors. The meeting room was silent, but the atmosphere was tense. He placed his tablet on the table and, without any introduction, began playing short clips of the recordings and images he had collected during his silent investigation. The stories revealed left no room for excuses. Employees laughing at seniors, mocking simple customers, and in some cases, outright ignoring service out of prejudice. The shock was immediate. Some directors, visibly embarrassed, tried to avoid eye contact. It was impossible to deny. There was a cultural issue within the company that had long been overlooked, and the most dangerous part of these problems is precisely their invisibility until they eventually explode publicly. Calmly, understanding the weight of leadership, Roberto didn't point fingers. Instead, he asked the question that would echo in everyone's minds. Is this the company we want to build? This moment of shock needed to be channeled into something constructive. Roberto knew that simply firing or punishing wouldn't solve the deeper issue. It was time for re-education. Just like the stories of major companies that went through internal revolutions like Netflix, which reinvented its culture after recognizing its blind spots, Roberto wanted to turn this episode into a turning point. And that's when the idea for the next step began to take shape. A leader's greatness is often measured by the solutions they propose in the face of mistakes. Roberto proposed something bold, an empathy and humanized service training program. But it wouldn't be one of those boring courses filled with slides and cliches. No, he wanted the employees to experience firsthand what vulnerable customers feel. That's how the practical simulations were born. Sessions where each employee would, for a few hours, live as an elderly person, a wheelchair user, or someone with speech difficulties. Real experience, real learning. The stories lived through in these training sessions were powerful. Employees who once mocked elderly customers now had to face blurred vision, limited mobility, and impaired hearing. It was a shock. How do you serve a heavy tray when your hands are trembling? How do you read the menu with fogged-up glasses? Small details that were previously ignored suddenly took on a whole new dimension. Right there, the first seeds of consciousness transformation were beginning to sprout. These experiences not only taught empathy, but also brought practical solutions. For example, after the training, many suggested changes in the store layout, menus with larger print, reinforced chairs, and more patient, attentive service. Simple adjustments that could impact thousands of previously invisible customers. Roberto watched with pride as stories of contempt were starting to be replaced by stories of learning and growth. But the true test was still to come. Days later, the stage was set for one of those stories that fate seems to write with particular care. The same elderly man who had once been mocked returned to the restaurant, but this time he was not alone. Beside him was a group of discreet but influential business people representing a major corporate chain interested in signing a multi-million-dollar supply contract with Roberto's network. It was undoubtedly one of those life tests meant to reveal how much we've truly learned. Unlike the previous visit, the atmosphere in the restaurant was completely different. The employees, now with renewed awareness, greeted the group with genuine respect. They addressed the elderly man by name, offered assistance with the menu, and seated everyone with patience and attention to detail. The service didn't feel forced. It was sincere. The stories lived during training were now being naturally put into practice, becoming part of the company's new identity. Observing from afar, Roberto knew that moment was worth more than any quality audit. It was living proof that culture isn't imposed. It's built through experiences and examples. The next step, however, would be decisive. It was time to reveal who he really was and show the employees the true dimension of the transformation they were creating, not just in the restaurant, but in their own lives and careers. What was now unfolding went far beyond a simple behavior correction. The employees had truly turned the key. They understood that every customer carries a unique and valuable story. It was no longer just about serving food, but about creating a welcoming experience where everyone felt seen and respected. The elderly man, once underestimated, was now treated with the same care afforded to any high-ranking executive, and ironically, that's exactly who he was at that moment. This kind of turning point only happens when change reaches the heart. It's like the story of companies like Zappos, who built empires through an obsession with genuine human service. At Roberto's restaurant, the learning was already spilling beyond the counter. Employees were helping each other, subtly correcting behaviors and even suggesting new ideas for inclusion and accessibility. It was as if the once ignored stories were finally finding their rightful place. But as any wise mentor knows, the true test of transformation comes when no one is watching. Roberto understood that this moment was crucial to solidify everything that had been learned. That's why he decided it was time to take the next step. He didn't just want to validate the change, he wanted to elevate some to a new level of responsibility and leadership. And that's exactly what was coming next. Finally, the day of the revelation arrived. Roberto gathered the entire team of that unit for a special meeting. Many still believed it would be just another routine feedback session, but they were about to live one of those stories that mark people forever. With a calm smile, he took off his delivery cap and for the first time, revealed his true identity. The shock was immediate. Looks of surprise, a few discreet tears, and a silence thick with emotion. But instead of scolding or punishment, Roberto chose the path of wisdom. He congratulated everyone on the visible and sincere transformation in their service. However, he emphasized that some had stood out, not just for changing their behavior, but for showing natural leadership throughout the process. Right there, in front of everyone, he announced new promotions and responsibilities for those who had truly embraced the company's culture. The stories of contempt were now giving way to stories of growth and recognition. Roberto knew this was only the beginning. Like any learning journey, maintaining the culture would require continuous effort. But the first great step had been taken, and more importantly, it had been understood in practice. Now it was time to spread this new vision throughout the entire network. But before that, he wanted to leave one last lesson that would change not only the company's direction, but also how each person would view their own work from that moment on. With all employees gathered, Roberto stepped onto the stage, took a deep breath, and with the authority of someone who had lived every piece of that story, began to speak. My friends, never underestimate anyone. The greatness of a company, and of a person, lies in how we treat even those we don't consider important. His words, filled with simplicity and depth, echoed through the room as a reminder of something everyone knows deep down, but few practice. He then shared small real-life stories, like customers who returned not for the food but for the sense of welcome. He told the story of the elderly man, who was, in fact, one of the key investors behind the corporate contract that would now ensure growth and financial security for everyone. And he made sure to emphasize that the contract was only possible because the change happened from the inside out. A culture built not on fear, but on awareness. As he spoke, Roberto knew he was planting seeds for something much greater, because in the end, business is made of people and stories. And as a mentor, he left a challenge hanging in the air. Ask yourselves every day, what story am I writing with my actions today? Because believe me, someone is always watching, and it may be exactly the person you least expect. But the journey of transformation didn't end there. On the contrary, it was just beginning. Now tell me, how many times do we also judge without even noticing? How many life stories pass right by us every day, and we simply don't see them? What happened in that restaurant teaches us one powerful truth. What you do when you think no one is watching defines who you really are. And the question remains, are you building a story of respect or regret? If someone evaluated your service, your work, your way of treating others today, what would the result be? Think about it. Because while some lose opportunities by judging, others grow by seeing what few can see. Now, if you want to keep learning from these transformational stories and apply them to your life and career, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and join us on this journey of growth. The next stories could be yours.